Laughter filled the observation lounge of the Starlight Dawn as species from 12 different worlds gathered for cultural exchange night. A Brellian chef had prepared dishes from 6 planets. A Telvari musician played soft melodies on an instrument made of crystal. The crew of the exploration vessel had been together for 3 years, and these evenings had become sacred. Captain Yelthra Voss watched from her corner seat, her compound eyes tracking every interaction. As a Kathrani, she stood taller than most species, her elegant insectoid form draped in the blue uniform of Coalition Command. She had commanded this vessel for 12 years. She believed she understood every species under her care. Tonight would prove her wrong. Navigator Prella, a young Kathrani female, sat among a mixed group discussing survival instincts. The conversation had turned to fear, and each species shared what terrified them most. We Kathrani fear the cold, Prella explained to the group. Our metabolism slows. We become helpless. It is why we never colonized ice worlds. Torval, the Brellian medical officer, nodded his amphibious head. My people fear dryness. Without moisture, our skin cracks. We suffocate slowly. A terrible death. The Telvari communications officer touched her antennae. Isolation. To be cut from our hive mind is to lose ourselves completely. Many who experience it never recover. Every species had spoken. Every species except the humans. 7 humans served aboard the Starlight Dawn, part of a new integration program between the Coalition and the Human Alliance. They sat together at one table, suddenly quiet. What about you? Prella asked, her curiosity genuine. What do humans fear most? Lieutenant Daniel Reyes set down his drink slowly. He was a quiet man in his 30s, formerly a wilderness rescue operative from a mountain region on Earth. His eyes moved to his fellow humans. Something unspoken passed between them. Heights, he said. Darkness. Predators. The usual things. But his colleagues were shaking their heads slightly. Captain Yelfrin noticed. Her analytical mind, honed by decades of command, detected the evasion immediately. She rose from her seat and approached the human table. The lounge grew quieter. Lieutenant Reyes, she said, her voice carrying the authority of her rank. I have served with many species. I have learned that understanding fear is essential to understanding a people. Your answer was incomplete. Daniel looked up at her. With respect, Captain, some things are difficult to explain. I am patient, and some things are better left unsaid. Yelthra's antennae twitched with irritation. She was not accustomed to evasion from her crew. I am ordering you to answer truthfully, she said. As your commanding officer, what do humans truly fear? The lounge fell completely silent. Every alien, I turned toward the human table. Daniel exchanged one final look with his colleagues. A woman named Grace nodded almost imperceptibly. Daniel sighed and stood to face the captain directly. We fear ourselves, he said quietly. We fear what we might become. Yelfra's compound eyes blinked in confusion. Explain. Every sentient species has predators they evolved to fear. External threats. Things that hunt them, environments that kill them. Daniel paused. Humans are different. We became the apex predator of our world. Nothing hunted us. Nothing threatened us except ourselves. I do not understand. We evolved the capacity for incredible cooperation and incredible cruelty. Both exist in every human. Every single one of us carries the potential for heroism and atrocity in equal measure. His voice dropped lower. Our history is filled with horrors we inflicted on each other. Not for survival, not for resources, for ideology, for hatred, for pleasure. The alien stared. Torval's gills fluttered with discomfort. You fear your own nature, Yelthra said slowly, processing. We fear the monster that lives in every human heart. We fear that one day we might stop fighting it. We fear that the darkness will win. Prella spoke up from her seat. But you have not destroyed yourselves. Your species thrives. Because we never stop choosing, Daniel said. Every day, every human makes the choice to be good instead of evil. We build laws, societies, moral codes, all designed to keep ourselves in check. Human civilization is one long attempt to be better than our worst impulses. Captain Yelthra stood motionless. In all her years commanding alien crews, she had never encountered this concept. The Kathrani waged war, yes, but for logical reasons. Territory, resources, survival. The idea of harming others for abstract beliefs or emotional satisfaction was truly alien to her. "You expect me to believe," she said carefully, "that your greatest fear is not death, not predators, not environmental threats, but your own capacity for evil?" "Yes, Captain. And this fear shapes your entire civilization. It is why we have civilization at all." Before Yelthra could respond, the ship's alarm blared through the lounge. Red emergency lighting flooded the room. A voice crackled over the communication system. "All hands to stations. Distress signal received from Coalition colony on Verith Prime. Raiders attacking civilian population. Repeat, raiders attacking civilian population." Daniel was already moving toward the door. As he passed the captain, she grabbed his arm. "Lieutenant." He turned. In his eyes, she saw something shift. The gentle, thoughtful man she knew was still there, but beneath that surface, something cold and calculating had awakened. Something that looked at the universe and made decisions without hesitation. "Captain," he said, "you wanted to understand what humans fear. You are about to see why." He pulled free and ran toward his station. Captain Yelthra watched him go, a chill running through her exoskeleton that had nothing to do with temperature. For the first time in her long career, she wondered if she truly wanted to understand humans at all. 3 raider vessels hung in the void above Verith Prime, raining fire on the colony below. Through the bridge viewport, Captain Yelthra could see the orange glow of burning settlements against the planet's green surface. Thousands of Coalition citizens were dying while she watched. "Status report," she commanded. 3 Vrelican Raider ships, her tactical officer replied. "Heavy cruiser class. Combined firepower exceeds ours by factor of 4. Standard doctrine recommends observation and request for military support." Yelthra's mandibles clicked in frustration. The Starlight Dawn was an exploration vessel. She had weapons, yes, but nothing designed for this kind of engagement. Military backup was at least 6 hours away. 6 hours. How many would die in 6 hours? "Begin composing distress call to Coalition Command," she ordered. "Record everything for tactical analysis." "Captain." Daniel Reyes stood at the bridge entrance. Behind him, the 6 other humans had gathered. They wore combat gear and carried weapons that seemed almost primitive compared to Coalition standard equipment. "Lieutenant," Yelthra said, "return to your station. We request permission to take a shuttle to the surface." Yelthra turned fully to face him. "To what purpose?" "Evacuation assistance. We can help civilians reach safety while we wait for reinforcements. The colony is overrun with Vrelican raiders. There are hundreds of them. You are 7 humans. We understand the odds, Captain." Torval stepped forward from his medical station. "This is suicide. The Vrelican take slaves and kill resistors. You cannot possibly make a difference." Daniel looked at the amphibian doctor calmly. "With respect, sir, we can. We will." "How?" Yelthra demanded. "Explain your tactical reasoning." "Because I see none." Daniel was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was different. Harder. "Captain, you asked me what humans fear. I told you we fear ourselves. But there is something we fear even more than that." "And what is that?" "We fear standing by while innocents suffer. We fear becoming the kind of people who calculate odds and decide some lives are not worth saving. We fear living with the knowledge that we could have acted and chose not to." He stepped closer to her command chair. "We fear becoming monsters through inaction as much as through action. Maybe more." Yelthra studied his face. The gentle man she knew was still present, but layered beneath was something else. A resolve that seemed carved from stone. An absolute certainty that terrified her precisely because she could not understand its source. "You will die," she said simply. "Possibly, probably even, but we will not stand here and watch." Navigator Prella spoke from her station. "Captain, the raiders are focusing on the eastern settlement. Refugee camps have formed in the Western Mountains. If the humans could reach those camps, they might establish a defensive perimeter until reinforcements arrive. It is still suicide, Torval insisted. Then it is our choice to make, said Grace, stepping forward beside Daniel. We are not asking permission to live. We are asking permission to die in a way we can accept. The bridge fell silent. Yelthra looked at each human face. She saw fear in their eyes, yes, but not fear of the raiders, not fear of death. They feared something else entirely. They feared failing to act. You truly believe you can make a difference, Yelthra said slowly. We know we can, Dana replied, because we will not stop until we do or until we are dead. There is no third option for us. Yelthra made her decision. Shuttle Bay 3. You have authorization for 1 transport shuttle. I will provide what tactical support I can from orbit without engaging the raiders directly. Daniel nodded sharply. Thank you, Captain. Do not thank me. I am sending you to your deaths. No, Captain. You are giving us a chance to live with ourselves. Whatever happens down there, we will not have to spend the rest of our lives knowing we did nothing. The humans turned and ran for the shuttle bay. Yelthra watched them go, her mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. Captain, Prella said quietly, shall I continue recording? Yes, everything. I want a complete record of what happens next. The shuttle launched minutes later, a tiny spark of light descending toward the burning world. On the main view screen, Yelthra tracked its progress through raider patrols and anti-aircraft fire. They are insane, Torval muttered. Absolutely insane. Perhaps, Yelthra replied, or perhaps we simply do not understand them yet. The shuttle dove toward the Western Mountains, weaving through enemy fire with desperate skill. Twice it should have been destroyed. Twice the pilot found an impossible escape route. They have reached the surface, Prella announced, landing near the refugee camps. Yelthra leaned forward in her chair. Through long-range sensors, she could see the tiny figures of 7 humans emerging from the shuttle, running toward the frightened masses of civilians, running toward certain death, running without hesitation. Open a channel to their communication frequency, Yelthra ordered. I want to hear everything. Static crackled, then resolved into voices. Human voices coordinating defensive positions, organizing evacuation routes, calming terrified colonists. And in the distance, the sound of Relican raiders approaching. Contact in 5 minutes, Daniel's voice said calmly. Everyone hold positions. Remember what we are here to do. What are we here to do? A younger human voice asked. We are here to be human. The best version of human we can be. Yelthra gripped her command chair. In her entire career, she had never felt so helpless and never so desperate to understand. The first shots were fired. The battle for Varith Prime had begun. Screaming filled the communication channel. Not human screaming, Relican screaming. Captain Yelthra leaned closer to the view screen, her compound eyes struggling to process what she was seeing. The long-range sensors painted a picture that defied everything she knew about combat. 7 humans were holding a defensive line against 40 raiders, and they were winning. This is impossible, Torval whispered from his medical station. The Vrelican are elite warriors. They have conquered dozens of species. Keep recording, Yelthra ordered Prella. Every second. Through the sensor feed, she watched Daniel Reyes move through the chaos with terrifying efficiency. He did not fight like a Kathrani, all logic and calculated strikes. He did not fight like a Vrelican, all rage and overwhelming force. He fought like something else entirely. A raider charged him from the left. Daniel sidestepped, grabbed the alien's arm, and redirected its momentum into a stone wall. Before the creature could recover, Daniel had already moved to the next threat. No wastigmotion, no hosetastion, no merci, but also no cruelty. When a wounded raider fell at his feet, Daniel did not execute it. He secured its weapons and moved on. When another surrendered, hands raised, Daniel gestured toward a holding area where other captured raiders sat bound and guarded. He is taking prisoners, Yelthra said, confused. In the middle of combat. Humans do not kill those who surrender, Prella said, reading from her cultural database. It is considered dishonorable. It is considered inefficient, Torval countered. Every prisoner requires guards. Resources. On the screen, a group of raiders had cornered a cluster of civilian refugees, mostly children and elderly. The Vrelican raised weapons, preparing to take slaves or eliminate witnesses. Grace sprinted toward them, her voice carrying over the communication channel. Daniel, the children. Daniel turned. For one heartbeat, Yelthra saw his face clearly through the enhanced sensors. Something changed in his expression. The controlled efficiency vanished. Something older and darker took its place. He ran, not toward safety, not toward tactical advantage, directly toward overwhelming force. The raiders saw him coming. They turned their weapons. They fired. Daniel did not stop. He took a plasma bolt to the shoulder. His armor absorbed some of the impact, but the burn was severe. He kept running. He crashed into the first raider like a force of nature, sending the creature flying. The second raider aimed at his head. Daniel ducked, grabbed its weapon, and used it as a club against the third. In seconds, 5 raiders lay unconscious or groaning on the ground. Daniel stood over the terrified children, his burned shoulder smoking, his breathing heavy. "It is all right," he said gently. "You are safe now." Yelthra realized she had stopped breathing. "Captain," the tactical officer said urgently, "reinforcements approaching the human position. Approximately 60 additional raiders." "They cannot survive that," Torval said. But on the screen, the humans were regrouping. They formed a tight defensive circle around the civilian shelter. They checked weapons. They nodded to each other. They did not retreat. "All positions hold." Daniel's voice came through the channel, calm despite his wounds. "We are buying time. Every minute matters." "Daniel, your shoulder," Grace said. "Later. Focus." The new wave of raiders crested the hill. 60 warriors, armed and armored, facing 7 wounded humans. "Surrender," the Vrelican leader called out. "You cannot win. Lay down your weapons, and some of you will be spared as slaves." Daniel stepped forward. Blood dripped from his shoulder. His face was covered in dust and ash, but his voice carried clearly across the battlefield. "No, you are 7. We are 60. This is mathematics." "Then you do not understand humans very well." Daniel raised his weapon. His colleagues raised theirs. "We are not fighting to win," he said. "We are fighting because these people deserve someone willing to fight for them. We are fighting because standing aside would make us into something we cannot accept." The Vrelican leader seemed genuinely confused. "You would die for strangers? For aliens? For people not of your species?" "We would die for the right to call ourselves human." The raiders attacked. What followed was the most brutal combat Yelthra had ever witnessed. The humans fought with a ferocity that seemed to transcend their physical limitations. When one fell wounded, another covered them. When ammunition ran low, they used improvised weapons. When improvised weapons broke, they used their hands. 2 humans went down, then a third. But the raiders were taking losses too. Heavy losses. 40 raiders eliminated. The tactical officer reported in disbelief. 20 remaining. "How?" Torval demanded. "How is this possible?" Yelthra finally understood. "They're not fighting for victory," she said quietly. "They're fighting against themselves. Every raider they stop is proof that they are not monsters. Every life they save is a victory against their own darkness." On the screen, Daniel took another wound. He fell to one knee. A raider stood over him, weapon raised for the killing blow. Daniel looked up at death without flinching. "Whatever happens," he said, "we chose right." The raider swung, and then the sky filled with light. Coalition military vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel, weapons blazing. The reinforcements had arrived. On the surface, the remaining raiders scattered. The battle was over. Daniel collapsed beside the children he had saved, his blood mixing with the dust of an alien world. Yelthra stared at the screen. 7 humans had held the line against impossible odds for nearly 2 hours. She finally understood what they truly feared, and why that fear made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Smoke still rose from the destroyed settlements as Captain Yelthra walked through the refugee camp. Coalition medical teams had established field hospitals everywhere. The cries of the wounded mixed with the relieved weeping of survivors. But Yelthra was searching for something specific. She found Daniel Reyes sitting against a broken wall, his shoulder wrapped in emergency bandages. A young alien child, no more than 5 years old by Coalition standards, was curled in his lap, sleeping peacefully. The child's parents had not survived the attack. Daniel looked up as she approached. His face was pale from blood loss. His eyes were exhausted, but he managed a small nod of acknowledgement. Captain. Yelthra lowered herself to sit beside him, her long insectoid legs folding beneath her. For a moment, neither spoke. The child would not let go, Daniel finally said, looking down at the sleeping form. She grabbed my hand during the fighting and would not release it, even after it was over. You saved her life. We saved many lives today. Whether it was enough remains to be seen. Yelthra studied him carefully. Chief Medical Officer Torval tells me you should have died 3 times during that battle. Your wounds were severe. Your blood loss was critical. Yet you kept fighting. I did not have a choice. You had every choice. You could have retreated. You could have prioritized your own survival. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, I really could not have. Explain this to me. Help me understand. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired but honest. Do you remember what I told you about human fear? About the darkness we all carry? Yes. When I was fighting today, I felt it. The anger, the rage. Every time a raider threatened those children, I felt something inside me that wanted to do terrible things. Not just stop them, hurt them, make them suffer for what they had done. Yelthra's antennae twitched. But you did not. No, but I wanted to. And that wanting, that capacity, it is always there. It never goes away. He looked at her directly. I could have killed every raider who surrendered. I could have made them pay for the lives they took. Part of me wanted to do exactly that. Yet you took prisoners. Because if I had given in to that darkness, even once, I would have become exactly what I fear most. I would have proven that the monster was stronger than the man. Yelthra processed this. On her home world, such internal conflict would be considered weakness. A Kathrani warrior did not struggle with themselves. They simply acted according to logic and duty. But watching Daniel hold that orphan child, she began to wonder if the Kathrani approach was actually superior. The child trusts you, she observed. Children are good at sensing intentions. She knows I would never harm her. She knows I fought for her. He smiled sadly. She does not know how close I came to becoming something that would terrify her. But you did not become that thing. Not today. But the battle is never truly over. Tomorrow I will face the same choice. And the day after. And every day until I die. Across the camp, Torval was treating the wounded humans. Grace had a broken arm. A young man named Cooper had lost significant blood. 2 others had injuries that would require weeks of recovery. But they were all alive. Yelthra watched as civilians approached the wounded humans, offering water, food, blankets. An elderly Telvari female bowed deeply before Grace, tears streaming down her face. Grace simply took her hand and held it. Your species confuses me, Yelthra admitted. We confuse ourselves, Captain. You are so capable of destruction, yet you choose protection. You are so filled with darkness, yet you reach for light. How do you maintain this balance? Daniel considered the question carefully. We hold each other accountable. Did you notice how my team operates? We watch each other, not for enemies, but for signs that one of us is slipping. If I had started executing prisoners, Grace would have stopped me. If she had lost herself to rage, I would have intervened. A mutual defense pact. Against ourselves, against our own worst nature. Human community, at its best, is a constant reminder that we are not alone in this struggle, that others are fighting the same battle within themselves. The sleeping child stirred, clutching Daniel's shirt tighter. He adjusted his position to make her more comfortable, wincing as the movement pulled at his wounds. You need proper medical treatment, Yelthra said. The civilians first, then my team, then me. That is not logical. No, but it is necessary. For me. For who I need to be. Yelthra stood slowly. She looked down at this strange, contradictory being who had somehow become the most fascinating creature she had ever commanded. Lieutenant Reyes. Captain, when you are recovered, I would like to continue our discussion. I have many more questions. I will answer what I can. She began walking away, then paused. For what it is worth, I believe I am beginning to understand why humanity was welcomed into the coalition. Not because of your technology or your strength, but because of your fear. Daniel looked up at her, surprised. A species that constantly battles its own darkness, Yelthra continued, will never stop fighting for what is right. Because for you, every battle is personal. She left him there, holding an orphan against the ruins of a world, and wondered what humanity would teach her next. Stars drifted past the viewport of Captain Yelthra's private quarters as the starlight, Dawn traveled toward the nearest starbase for repairs. 2 weeks had passed since the Battle of Varith Prime. The wounded were healing. The dead had been honored. But questions remained. Daniel Reyes sat across from her, his shoulders still bandaged but his color returned. Navigator Prella occupied a corner seat, her recording device active for cultural documentation. This conversation had been delayed too long. I have studied your history, Yelthra began without preamble. Your wars, your atrocities, your capacity for organized cruelty at scales no other species has achieved. Daniel nodded slowly. And I found accounts of humans torturing other humans for information they did not even need. Records of genocide based on minor genetic differences. Evidence of cruelty practiced as entertainment. All true. How do you live with this heritage? How does your species function knowing what you are capable of? Daniel leaned forward. That is precisely why we function, Captain. Because we know. Because we never forget. Explained further. The species that forget their capacity for evil are the ones who repeat it. Humans remember. We teach our children about the worst things we have done. We build memorials to our victims. We study our own darkness with the same intensity we study science or art. Prella spoke up. In my observations, humans seem to check on each other frequently, asking about emotional states, offering support without prompting. I assumed this was simple friendliness. It is more than that, Daniel said. We watch for warning signs. We look for isolation, for anger turning inward, for signs that someone is losing their grip on who they want to be. Human friendship is partly surveillance. You monitor each other for potential evil, Yelthra said. We support each other against it. There is a difference. When I returned from the battle, my teammates did not just treat my wounds. They talked to me, made sure I processed what happened, made sure I had not crossed any lines I could not return from. And if you had crossed those lines, Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then they would have helped me find my way back, or stopped me from causing more harm. Whatever was necessary. Yelthra considered this. The concept was foreign to Kathrani thinking. Her species dealt with aberrant behavior through logic and, if necessary, removal from society. The idea of actively working to rehabilitate a potential threat was strange. Yet she could not deny its effectiveness. Humans had survived themselves for thousands of years. What about the darkness that is not expressed? She asked. The evil thoughts that never become evil actions? Everyone has them. The key is not eliminating dark thoughts. That is impossible. The key is choosing not to act on them. Daniel smiled slightly. I have thought terrible things, Captain. In the heat of battle, I have imagined cruelties that would disturb you. But thinking is not doing. The choice, the constant conscious choice to be better than our impulses, that is what defines us. It sounds exhausting. It is. But the alternative is worse. Prella finished recording a note and looked up. You mentioned that humans who deny their capacity for darkness are the most dangerous. What did you mean? The human who believes they are incapable of evil has stopped watching themselves. They have stopped questioning their own motives. They become convinced that everything they do must be good because they themselves are good. Daniel's expression darkened. History's greatest monsters almost always believed they were heroes. They committed atrocities while convinced of their own righteousness. So admitting you could become a monster is protection against actually becoming one. It is the first step. Constant vigilance is the rest. Yelthra rose and walked to her viewport. The stars seemed different now, less peaceful, more complicated. I have one more question, she said without turning. What would happen if humanity faced an enemy so terrible that holding back became impossible? An enemy that forced you to stop choosing restraint. The silence stretched long enough that she turned to look at Daniel. His face had become very still. That is the question we all fear most, he said quietly. What happens when we stop being afraid of ourselves? What happens when we decide the enemy deserves everything we are capable of inflicting? What is your answer? I do not have one. None of us do. We simply hope it never happens. But if it did, Daniel stood slowly. He walked to stand beside her at the viewport, looking out at the same stars. If it did, he said, the galaxy would learn why Earth is called a death world. Not because of our predators or our environment, but because we're the most dangerous thing our planet ever produced. And we have spent our entire existence keeping ourselves contained. Yelthra felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. You are the cage, she said softly, understanding finally. Each human is both the monster and the cage that holds it. Yes, and you fear the day the cage breaks. Every single day. They stood together in silence, watching the stars drift past, two very different beings contemplating the same terrifying truth. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, humanity continued its endless internal war, fighting not for territory or resources, but for the right to call themselves good. And the galaxy, whether it knew it or not, depended on them winning that fight. Applause echoed through the ceremonial hall of Starbase 12 as Captain Yelthra finished her speech. Representatives from dozens of coalition species had gathered to witness the commendation ceremony for the Starlight Dawn's human crew. The Silver Nebula, the coalition's highest honor for valor, would be awarded to all 7 humans who had defended Varith Prime. But Yelthra had not given a typical commendation speech. She had spoken of fear. The assembled dignitaries shifted uncomfortably as she described what Daniel had told her. About human darkness. About the constant choice to be good rather than evil. About a species that lived in perpetual war with its own nature. When she finished, the silence was heavy. Then Daniel Reyes stepped forward to accept the medals on behalf of his team. He looked out at the crowd of alien faces. Politicians, military commanders, scientists, diplomats, beings from worlds that had never produced anything like humanity. Beings who could not understand what it meant to be your own greatest enemy. Thank you, Captain Yelthra, he said, for asking the question, for wanting to understand. He held up the silver nebula, letting the light catch its surface. This medal is beautiful, and we are honored to receive it. But I want you to understand something. The room leaned in. We did not fight on Varith Prime for medals. We did not fight for glory or recognition or political advantage. We fought because we had to, not because anyone ordered us to, but because anything less would have made us into something we could not accept. He looked directly at Yelthra. Every human carries within them the capacity for terrible darkness. We know this. We live with this knowledge every moment of every day. And that knowledge, that constant awareness, is what makes us fight so hard for others. He lowered the medal. Every act of kindness is a victory against our own shadow. Every life saved is proof that we are more than our worst impulses. Every moment of mercy is a vote for the best version of humanity. The Telvari ambassador leaned forward. You speak of this internal struggle as though it strengthens you. It does. A species that has never faced its own capacity for evil cannot truly understand good. We understand both. We have seen both. And we choose every single day to reach for light even though the darkness is always there. A Brellian general spoke up. What happens when you fail? When individual humans give in to this darkness you describe, then others step in. We hold each other accountable. We catch each other when we fall. And when we cannot be saved, we stop those who have been lost. Daniel's voice was steady. Human history is filled with monsters, but it is also filled with those who stood against them, often at the cost of their own lives. Captain Yelthra stepped forward to stand beside him. I have served with many species, she said. I have never met one that frightened me. Until humans. Not because of your strength or your violence, but because you understand exactly what you are capable of and you keep choosing to be better anyway. She turned to face the assembly. That is why humanity belongs in the coalition. Not as warriors to be aimed at our enemies, but as a reminder of what is possible when a species refuses to surrender to its own nature. The ceremony concluded with traditional songs from a dozen worlds. The humans stood together, accepting congratulations, answering questions, being studied by curious aliens who suddenly saw them in a new light. Later that evening, Yelthra found Daniel in the observation lounge of the starbase. He stood alone at the window, watching ships come and go. You spoke well today, she said, joining him. I spoke truthfully. That is not always the same thing. It was today. They watched the stars in comfortable silence. After a while, Daniel spoke. Navigator Prella's report is being distributed throughout the coalition. By next month, every species will know what humans truly fear. Does this concern you? No. Understanding is rarely a bad thing. And maybe, knowing our struggle, they will be more patient with us when we stumble. Yelthra considered this, or they will fear you even more. Also possible, but fear born of understanding is different from fear born of ignorance. The first can lead to respect. The second only leads to conflict. A ship departed from the star base, its engines flaring blue against the darkness. Daniel tracked it with his eyes until it vanished into the void. Are you afraid right now? Yelthra asked softly. Daniel smiled slightly. Always, Captain. Always. Good, she replied, surprising herself with the word. I am beginning to understand that this is exactly how it should be. They stood together at the window, two warriors from very different worlds, bound by a shared understanding that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. Somewhere across the galaxy, humans continued their endless internal battle, choosing kindness over cruelty, choosing mercy over vengeance, choosing to be the best version of themselves when the worst version was always within reach. In the galaxy, one alien at a time was beginning to understand why that mattered. Captain Yelthra looked at her human lieutenant and realized something important. She was no longer frightened of humans. She was frightened for them, because she finally understood what they faced every single day. And she hoped, with all her Kathrani heart, that they would never stop winning that fight. For all their sakes,